Welcome to the Chicory's Refit video series, this time the Mizzen Mast deck support. This old photo of Chicory's salon kind of shows the area that we're focusing on in this refit. There's a post that comes up from the engine room that's supported directly on the engine beds, and this supports the top deck where the Mizzen Mast is stepped. This area had 4 pieces of plywood that were between the post and the deck that showed massive signs of leakage. I don't have any before pictures of the area that I fixed, but I made a quick illustration here showing where that plywood area was stacked up. You can see that it's a spacer between the top of the post and the bottom of the deck. The deck, of course, is a sandwich of a piece of fiberglass, coring, and then another piece of fiberglass, and then the Mizzen Mast is stepped on the top. Now this had been leaking for quite some time, and this area that I've illustrated showed quite a bit of dry rot. Here's an image showing the extent of that dry rot. Once I removed the Mizzen Mast post and the 4 sheets of plywood that were used as a spacer, I had the underside of the deck above exposed. I knew that the core inside the deck was rotted and needed to be removed. The best way to do this was to take an oscillating multi-tool and cut the outer skin, the bottom skin, of the fiberglass buildup and expose that core. Once it was exposed, I used a chisel and multi-tools to remove all of the core, so only the top layer of fiberglass was left on the top side of the deck. Once I had the immediate area underneath the Mizzen Mast removed, then I started digging in horizontally into the core, removing anything that was rotten. This was a difficult process because it was only 3/4 inch space, but I was very effective at digging out all of the rot. I purchased 5 1-inch thick, 1 foot by 1 foot panels from McMaster-Carr of FRP buildup, and these are being used in this picture to replace not only the coring, but all of the plywood spacers. Obviously, these 1 foot by 1 foot squares do not address the core that I dug out in the horizontal direction, both to the starboard and the port, and slightly aft and slightly forward. I addressed that issue in the following way. Once I was happy with the dry fit up, I back buttered each of the individual pieces of fiberglass with some thickened epoxy and built an assembly that ended up being a single monolithic piece of fiberglass 5 inches thick. And then I took all the space that was around it and used the thickened epoxy to make sure that I had a liquid tight seal between the bottom laminate of the buildup in the deck and my new monolithic assembly. I mentioned that this seal was liquid tight, and that's important because of the next step. This view is from the upper deck where the Mizzen Mast bolts down. The red circled holes are the through bolt holes that hold the Mizzen Mast to the mast support that's down in the salon. The blue holes are holes that I drilled. Here's a look down one of those holes. You can see that the area of the core that was dug out is now exposed, and it's a big void that I can pour liquid epoxy into. Once the assembly that was inside the salon was fully cured, I then went up on the top deck and poured in a gallon of West System epoxy into the 4 holes shown. These voids took way more than I expected, and I kept on running down into the salon looking at what I hoped was a watertight seal was not leaking and spilling epoxy all over the salon floor. To my relief, everything held and the epoxy cured inside the core, and everything was solid as can be. The final step was simply to finish the woodworking and make sure everything looked good from a cosmetic standpoint. This project was a huge quality of life improvement because for 10 years I was chasing this leaking core material out of these bolt heads, and finally it's been now almost 8 years and we haven't had a leak once. Super happy with the results. I'm going to finish the video in the usual way, showing you a slow pan of the way the project looks today, and thank you again for watching, liking, and subscribing. Thanks again.